Hey there, welcome to our channel, where we share the creepiest and most mysterious stories that'll send a chill down your spine. Today's tale will take you to a quiet cemetery in Pennsylvania, where history seems to blend with the supernatural. This is the story of a man who, after losing his mother, visits her grave and encounters something far beyond what he could have imagined. Stay with us as we dive deep into the strange and terrifying experiences that would follow him long after he left the cemetery. It was a bleak, overcast afternoon when Mark, a 32-year-old man from a small, forgotten town in Pennsylvania, drove to the Fairhope Cemetery. His mother had passed away just a few weeks ago, and her gravestone had only recently been placed at the cemetery. Mark's emotions were raw, his heart weighed down by grief, and he needed to find some peace. Fairhope was an old, quiet place, nestled far on the outskirts of the town, surrounded by dense forest. The cemetery, with its aging headstones and overgrown grass, had always carried a haunting sense of abandonment, yet Mark found himself drawn there, hoping that the solitude would help ease the ache in his heart. That day, as Mark stood beside his mother's freshly placed grave, wiping away the lingering dirt and moss from the stone, he felt a strange, suffocating heaviness in the air. It was as if the entire world had gone still, holding its breath. His surroundings, once peaceful, seemed eerily muted, as if time had slowed down, pressing on his chest, making it difficult to breathe. He had no intention of staying long, just a quick visit to clean up the grave and gather his thoughts before he left. But as he stood there, a sudden, unsettling sensation crept over him. It was as if someone, or something, was watching him from a distance. Mark turned around, slowly scanning the cemetery, his eyes scanning the rows of weathered graves. His breath caught in his throat when he noticed a figure standing at the far end of the cemetery, near the older, crumbling gravestones. The figure was still, almost unnaturally so, frozen in place, not moving an inch. At first, Mark assumed it might be a groundskeeper or perhaps another visitor who had come to pay their respects, but as his gaze shifted to the stranger's attire, a chill ran down his spine. The man was dressed in what appeared to be a Civil War uniform, old, tattered, and faded. A weathered cap sat atop his head, and he wore brass insignia that gleamed faintly in the dim light. The details were too clear to be a mere figment of his imagination, and yet, there was something profoundly out of place about it. Mark tried to convince himself that it was nothing more than a trick of the light or his grief-fueled mind playing games with him. But when he blinked and looked back at the spot where the man had stood, the figure was gone. The air around him felt heavier, colder, and Mark couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Pushing the unsettling sight to the back of his mind, he left the cemetery, the eerie sense of being followed still gnawing at him. As he drove home, he tried to rationalize everything. "It was just my mind," he muttered to himself, "I'm just tired, just stressed." But when he glanced in the rearview mirror, his heart nearly stopped. There, standing by the side of the road, was the same man in the Civil War uniform, watching him with an intensity that seemed to pierce right through him. The strange thing was, Mark hadn't seen the man when he passed by the spot earlier. He couldn't explain it. He quickly shook his head, telling himself it was just his mind playing tricks, but that nagging unease lingered. He drove faster, desperate to get home, not daring to stop and confront whatever he was seeing. But when he pulled into his driveway, a new sense of dread washed over him. He stepped out of the car, and that's when he saw them large, deep boot prints in the dirt, leading from the street directly to his front door. Heavy military-style boots, the kind that could only belong to the figure he had seen earlier. Mark's heart raced as he followed the prints with his eyes, unable to understand what was happening. The prints weren't there when he had arrived home earlier, and now they seemed to be carved into the earth, an eerie trail that felt like it had followed him all the way back. But who could have made them? That night, sleep was impossible. The images of the soldier, the footprints, and the strange sensations haunted his thoughts. The air in his room felt thick, oppressive, and no matter how much he tried to ignore it, he couldn't shake the feeling that something, or someone, was lurking just beyond his reach. The next morning, when Mark woke up, his heart sank. The prints were still there, exactly the same as before. He went outside, checking again to make sure his mind hadn't played tricks on him, but there they were, the unmistakable imprints of heavy boots in the dirt, leading from the street to his doorstep. They hadn't been washed away by rain or wind. They were there, marking a path that made no sense. It was then that Mark knew something far more sinister was at play. It wasn't just a trick of the mind. Something had followed him home, and it wasn't going to let go easily. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Mark went to the local library. The old librarian, Carol, had worked there for decades, and he hoped she might know something about the cemetery or the strange occurrences. When he asked her about the unusual happenings at Fairhope Cemetery, she hesitated for a moment before responding in a hushed voice. "No one dares go to the back of the cemetery anymore," Carol said, her voice trembling slightly. "There's something not right back there. You see, during the Civil War, that cemetery was used to bury Union soldiers, those whose bodies were never claimed. Some say one of them never left. There's even an old newspaper article from 1973 that talks about sightings of a soldier in old uniform standing outside the cemetery." Mark's blood ran cold. The connection between the strange figure and the Civil War soldier was no longer a coincidence. His thoughts raced. Had he seen one of these long-dead soldiers? And if so, why was he being haunted? That night, Mark returned home, but the air was colder than usual, the silence more oppressive. At exactly 3:14 a.m., his doorbell rang, loud and insistent. When he opened the door, there was no one there. The feeling of dread continued to cling to him, even as he tried to convince himself it was just his nerves. But when he woke up the next morning, the prints were there again, this time leading right up to his door. Unable to live with the fear any longer, Mark decided to return to the cemetery. The air was thick with anticipation as he drove back to Fairhope Cemetery. He stood at the edge of the cemetery, looking at the spot where the soldier had stood before. And there, in the distance, he saw him again, the same man in the Civil War uniform, standing still, his tired eyes fixed on Mark. This time, Mark didn't feel fear. Instead, there was a strange sense of peace. He raised his hand in a small wave, and the soldier slowly turned and walked into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. And just like that, the haunting ceased. No more footprints. No more chilling presence. But Mark knew one thing for certain: the spirit of the past had reached out to him, and he would never forget the eerie encounter. He never returned to the cemetery again. But the images of that soldier and the unsettling events would stay with him for the rest of his life. And as he lay in bed at night, he often found himself staring at the ceiling, wondering, had he truly encountered a ghost, or had it all been a trick of his mind? He would never be sure. All he knew was that some mysteries are better left unsolved. This story makes you wonder, do the souls of the past still wander the places they left behind, waiting to be remembered? If you've ever experienced something like this, please share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, so you never miss another chilling tale from our channel. Welcome back to our channel, where we share the most chilling, eerie, and unexplained stories. Today, we dive deep into a strange and terrifying tale that took place in Pennsylvania, where a family's peaceful life was interrupted by a series of haunting events surrounding an old cemetery. This story will not only make you question the existence of imaginary friends but also leave you wondering about the dark forces that could be lurking right beneath our feet. It was a crisp autumn day when the young family moved into a quiet, modest house on the outskirts of Pennsylvania. Nestled next to an ancient cemetery, the house was the perfect retreat for a fresh start. The family of 4 parents and their 2 children, a teenage son and a 5-year-old daughter named Ela, had hoped for peace and tranquility after a difficult year of transitions. Ela, a quiet and reserved little girl, was always drawn to the mysteries of the world, often staring out of the window for long periods, as though she could see things others couldn't. Her parents, busy unpacking and adjusting to their new life, didn't think much of it at first. But soon, strange things started happening. At first, it was just a harmless, though peculiar, conversation Ela would have. She would sit by the window, speaking to someone invisible, laughing and answering in a soft, sweet voice. "The Earth Boy says he likes the fall," Ela told her mother one afternoon, while playing in the garden. "He has brown clothes like dirt. He doesn't like it when the wind blows his hair." Her mother, assuming Ela was just being imaginative, smiled and nodded, thinking it was just the product of a child's whimsical mind. But as the days passed, Ela's imaginary friend, whom she called the Earth Boy, became more and more vivid in her descriptions. The child's conversations grew more frequent, and her laughter took on a strange, almost eerie quality, like she was in on a secret no one else could hear. Ela insisted that the Earth Boy was always with her, standing near her when she played, guiding her, and whispering things only she could understand. The descriptions grew more unsettling as Ela began saying things like, "The Earth Boy sleeps under a big stone in the graveyard. He doesn't like anyone talking about him." Her parents grew concerned, but they didn't want to dismiss Ela's words outright. After all, every child had imaginary friends, right? But things started to get worse, especially when tiny, muddy footprints began to appear around the house leading from the back door straight into Ela's room. The family chalked it up to dirt from the garden, but as the days went by, the prints became harder to ignore. They were too distinct, too deliberate, as though someone small had walked through the house, barefoot, and deliberately tracked dirt into Ela's room. One night, around 3 a.m., Ela woke up in the dark. She didn't make a sound, she simply got out of bed, walked out of her room, and headed toward the graveyard. Her parents had no idea where she was headed, but when Ela's older brother, Alex, heard the sound of the back door creaking open, he rushed to check. A sense of dread washed over him as he saw his younger sister walking, barefoot, in the cold night air, heading straight toward the cemetery. "Ela, what are you doing?" Alex called out, panic rising in his chest. Ela didn't respond. She didn't even turn around. She just continued walking as if she were in a trance. Alex, now terrified, ran after her, his heart pounding in his chest. When he reached the cemetery, he saw his sister sitting cross-legged beside a tombstone, speaking softly, her voice carrying on the wind. "I'm talking to him," she whispered, her eyes wide and distant. "The Earth Boy's waiting for me." "Ela, stop!" Alex shouted, rushing to pull her away, but she resisted, her tiny hands gripping the stone as if she were glued to it. "No, I'm doing the right thing." "He's waiting," she replied with an eerie calmness in her voice. Alex tried to drag her away, but then, they both heard its soft, unsettling sounds coming from beneath the ground. The noise was faint at first, like something scraping against the earth, and then, the ground itself seemed to shift. Alex froze, his blood running cold. The sound grew louder, more frantic, as though something or someone was trying to break through the earth. Ela's smile never faltered as she continued to speak to the unseen presence beneath them. In that moment, Alex could feel a dark energy in the air, something ancient, something that had been buried for too long, pushing its way out of the earth. He grabbed Ela, pulling her away from the grave, and as he did, he glanced back one last time. For a split second, he thought he saw something in the shadows, something dark, humanoid, but not quite human, watching them from beneath the ground. The family, now on edge, decided to dig deeper into the history of the cemetery. They spent days researching, speaking with locals, and even visiting the town library, where they uncovered a chilling truth: Fairview Cemetery wasn't just a resting place for the deceased. It had once been the final destination for those who had no family, no one to mourn them, and no proper burial. These were the forgotten souls, the ones whose deaths were buried in secrecy and neglect. Many of them had been buried hastily, and some, as the local legends went, had never truly rested. One night, when Ela once again slipped out of her room, her parents followed her quietly, their hearts heavy with dread. Ela returned to the same spot in the cemetery where she had sat before. When they reached her, she looked up at them, her eyes wide with innocence but also something far more unsettling, an awareness that didn't belong in a child. "The Earth Boy doesn't like hearing people talk about him," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Her parents were no longer sure what to believe. The muddy footprints had returned, and this time, they led into the house. The nights grew more oppressive, and the strange noises within the walls of their home became harder to ignore. Ela stopped talking to the Earth Boy, but the strange occurrences didn't stop. It was as if the boy had followed them into their home, his presence lingering in the very air they breathed. And then, one fateful day, as Ela went outside to play, she turned to her mother and said, "The Earth Boy is inside now." Her mother's blood ran cold. They had tried everything to protect her, but nothing could stop the eerie force that seemed to be haunting them all. It was as though the Earth Boy had claimed more than just Ela's attention, he had invaded their lives. This story isn't just about a little girl and an imaginary friend. It's a dark reminder that there are forces in this world, old, forgotten, and restless, that we cannot begin to understand. What happens when those forces aren't just stories, but very real presences that we can't escape? Do you believe in what can't be explained, in the things that lurk just beneath the surface, waiting to be unearthed? I don't know what's real anymore, but one thing is certain: we can never truly outrun the past.